What if I told you that one English king managed to lose an entire kingdom in a single battle, another starved to death while imprisoned in his own castle, and yet another was so despised that nobles literally forced him to sign away his power? Today, we're diving into the absolute train wreck that was English monarchy to answer one burning question. Who was the most incompetent king of England? Before we crown our champion of catastrophe, let's establish the rules. We're looking at pure incompetence here, not evil, not cruelty. We want kings who tried and failed spectacularly, who inherited power and somehow made everything worse. Think of it as the anti-highlights reel of English history. Let's meet our contestants. Contestant number 1, Ethelred the Unready. Our first candidate has incompetence literally in his name. Meet Ethelred the Unready, who ruled from 978 to 1016. Now, unready doesn't mean he showed up late to meetings. In Old English, unrad means poorly advised or no counsel. His actual name, Ethelred, means noble counsel. So essentially, his nickname was Good Counsel, the No Counsel. Medieval England had a brutal sense of irony. So what did Ethelred do to earn the savage nickname? Pretty much everything wrong. When Viking raiders started harassing England's coasts, most kings would build defenses, strengthen armies, or form alliances. Ethelred, he decided to just pay them to go away. This payment was called the Danegeld, and it started at 10,000 pounds of silver. Here's the thing about paying bullies. They come back for more, and they did, again and again, each time demanding more money. By 1012, Ethelred was paying 48,000 pounds of silver. That's not a defense strategy, that's a subscription service for getting invaded. But wait, it gets worse. In 1002, Ethelred had what he thought was a brilliant idea, the St. Brice's Day Massacre. He ordered the killing of all Danes in England. Sounds decisive, right? Wrong. First, it was impossible to carry out completely. Second, one of the victims was the sister of Svein Forkbeard, the king of Denmark. Svein was predictably not happy about his sister being murdered. He invaded with a massive army, and by 1013, Ethelred was forced to flee to Normandy. Ethelred the Unready, the king who paid his enemies until he ran out of money, then made them so angry they took his entire kingdom. Strong start to our competition. Contestant number 2, King John. If Ethelred is the appetizer of incompetence, King John is the main course. Ruling from 1199 to 1216, John managed to lose more territory, make more enemies, and anger more people than perhaps any king in English history. There's a reason no English king has been named John since. John inherited a massive empire from his father, Henry II, and brother, Richard the Lionheart. This included England, Normandy, and huge chunks of France. Within 5 years, he'd lost almost all of it to the French king, Philip Augustus. We're talking about half the Angevin Empire gone. Normandy, which had been connected to England since William the Conqueror, was lost in 1204. This earned John his first nickname, John Softsword. Not exactly striking fear into your enemies. But territorial losses were just the beginning. John had an extraordinary talent for making everyone hate him. He taxed his barons into oblivion to fund his failed military campaigns. He quarreled so badly with the Pope that England was placed under interdict for 6 years, meaning no services, marriages, or Christian burials. In medieval times, that was basically spiritual terrorism against your own people. John was also paranoid, cruel, and allegedly murdered his nephew Arthur when the young man might have had a claim to the throne. His barons had enough. In 1215, they forced him to sign the Magna Carta at Runnymede, a document that limited royal power. He signed it, then immediately tried to wriggle out of it, sparking the First Barons' War. Here's the cherry on top. John died in 1216, possibly from dysentery after supposedly losing the crown jewels in quicksand while crossing the Wash. Even his death was incompetent. The great medieval chronicler Matthew Paris wrote that John's reign was marked by foul deeds and said hell itself was made fouler by his presence. When medieval monks are roasting you in their chronicles, you know you've messed up. King John lost half an empire, fought with the Pope, got forced to sign away his power, and possibly died from bad shellfish. A worthy contender.
Contestant number 3, Edward II. Now we come to Edward II, who ruled from 1307 to 1327, and whose reign was essentially a master class in how to lose absolutely everyone's respect, including your wives. Edward had big shoes to fill. His father, Edward I, was a legendary warrior king called the Hammer of the Scots. Edward II, more like the feather duster of the Scots. He inherited an ongoing war with Scotland and immediately proved he had no idea what he was doing. In 1314, Edward led a massive English army to Scotland to break the siege of Stirling Castle. He outnumbered the Scots roughly 2-1 and had every advantage. At the Battle of Bannockburn, Robert the Bruce absolutely destroyed him. It's considered one of the most decisive victories in Scottish history and one of England's most humiliating defeats. Edward barely escaped with his life, leaving behind his shield, seal, and any credibility he had left. But military incompetence wasn't Edward's only problem. He was obsessed with his favorites, particularly Piers Gaveston, and later Hugh Despenser. Nothing wrong with having close friends, but Edward gave them so much power and wealth that his nobles revolted. Literally. They captured Gaveston and executed him in 1312. Did Edward learn his lesson? Absolutely not. He just found new favorites and did the same thing again. His wife, Isabella of France, eventually had enough. In 1326, she returned from France with an army and her lover, Roger Mortimer. Edward's support collapsed so completely that he was forced to abdicate in favor of his teenage son. But the story doesn't end there. Edward was imprisoned in Berkeley Castle, where he died in 1327 under mysterious circumstances. The official story is natural causes, but contemporary rumors suggested something far more gruesome involving a red-hot poker. Whether that's true or medieval propaganda, the fact that such stories were believed shows how little respect anyone had for him. Edward II lost Scotland, alienated everyone, including his wife, and ended up murdered in a dungeon. He's climbing the ranks. Contestant number 4, Henry VI. And folks, this is where incompetence reaches its final form. Henry ruled, in theory, from 1422 to 1461, and then briefly again from 1470 to 1471. I say in theory because Henry spent much of his reign being utterly incapable of actually ruling. Henry became king when he was just 9 months old. That's already a bad start. By the time he came of age, he proved to be pious, gentle, well-meaning, and completely unsuited for medieval kingship. He founded Eton College and King's College, Cambridge, so he wasn't stupid, just spectacularly bad at the whole being king thing. Here's where it gets wild. Henry inherited the 100 Years' War with France. His father, Henry V, had conquered huge portions of France, and Henry VI was actually crowned King of France in Paris. Then he managed to lose it all, every single bit. By 1453, England had lost everything in France except Calais. Decades of conquest gone. But personal incompetence reached new heights when Henry started having mental breakdowns. In 1453, he suffered what historians believe was a complete catatonic breakdown. For over a year, he couldn't speak, didn't recognize anyone, and was completely unresponsive. When his son was born, they brought the baby to him, and Henry gave no reaction whatsoever. Imagine being such an incompetent king that your body just shut down from the stress. This power vacuum triggered the Wars of the Roses, the devastating civil war between the houses of Lancaster and York. Henry was deposed in 1461, briefly restored in 1470, then deposed again in 1471. He was imprisoned in the Tower of London, where he died, murdered, possibly while praying. Think about this. Henry VI lost an entire kingdom in France, had multiple mental breakdowns, couldn't function as a human being, let alone a king, and started a civil war that devastated England for 30 years. His reign was so catastrophic that it literally destroyed the medieval English monarchy's stability for a generation. The verdict. So who wins, or rather loses, this contest? Let's review. Ethelred the Unready paid Vikings until he went broke, then made them so angry they conquered England. That's bad. King John lost half an empire, fought with the Pope, and got humiliated into signing the Magna Carta. That's worse. Edward II lost Scotland, alienated everyone, including his wife, and ended up murdered in a dungeon. That's really bad. But Henry VI, he lost an entire kingdom in France, had multiple mental breakdowns, couldn't function as a human being, let alone a king, and started a civil war that devastated England for 30 years. His incompetence had generational consequences. The most incompetent king of England is Henry VI. His reign represents the absolute peak of royal failure. He inherited 2 kingdoms and lost both. He was supposed to lead, and instead had to be cared for like an infant. He was meant to prevent war, and instead started one of the bloodiest periods in English history. Here's the tragedy. Unlike some of our other contestants, Henry wasn't malicious or cruel. He was, by all accounts, a kind and pious man. He just had no business being king. Medieval England needed a warrior king, or at least a competent administrator. Instead, he got a gentle soul who belonged in a monastery, not on a throne. It's almost sad. Almost. So there you have it. The most incompetent king of England was Henry VI, a man so unsuited for kingship that his reign literally broke the country. What do you think? Did we get it right, or is there another royal disaster we missed? Let us know in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this descent into medieval chaos, hit that like button and subscribe for more historical deep dives. Thanks for watching, and remember, if you're having a bad day at work, at least you're not losing 2 kingdoms and sparking a civil war.